Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Give Me Lemons. I am joined by the amazing Rachel. So excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Tell us about you.
So I am 28 years old. I was born and raised in Southern California, and then I went to college in Texas. I studied fashion in school, and then I moved back to LA when I graduated, and then I started working in fashion. I've been doing that ever since. I moved to the East Coast a couple years ago. I'm currently living in Manhattan. I'm currently going through a divorce as well. So I think right now, kind of like refiguring out who I am and starting over in a lot of ways. So I was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2023.
What was the process to getting diagnosed? Like, how did you know that you needed to see a doctor or something was wrong?
My symptoms were a little less common, I think, for lymphoma. So the first thing that I noticed, my lower back started to hurt on the right side. I was only 24 at the time. So I think I also had kind of that, like, I'm young and invincible and nothing bad could ever happen to me kind of vibe going on. After like a couple weeks, I went to urgent care. They gave me gabapentin and a round of steroids as well. And after a couple weeks, so they did an MRI and it didn't really show much. So they redid it like a week later. I had it sent to like a spine specialist. The pain had gotten to a point where it was like pretty much excruciating. It ended up in the ER like 2 or 3 times. Barely walk. It hurt so bad. So the spine doctor was the first like specialist that I saw. I thought my only symptom was lower back pain. I was also super fatigued and really itchy. I thought I was just tired from stress, work, and the itchiness I assumed. I thought it was like my detergent. And then at one point, I just kind of like stopped thinking about it. So that spine doctor ended up telling me, I don't really think much is wrong with you. So he was saying that I was having some sort of like muscle tissue bulge, like in between the discs. And he was like, you're just getting old. Old. I am freshly 25. Like, I don't necessarily think that I'm getting old. I ended up going to a different doctor. They kind of were just like, we think it might be like a hormones thing, something like that. I had a doctor tell me it could have been just like depression. And, I started to get kind of tired of going to doctors at this point. It's been like a year. My husband at the time, we moved to New Jersey. We moved in with his parents, and that kind of gave me the opportunity to go to some different doctors. I ended up going to an orthopedist, still operating on this weird like disc bulge theory. Physical therapy made it worse. They were just like, massaging all the super swollen lymph nodes. I convinced them to do a pelvic MRI. My orthopedist, I just seem to remember him saying, like, I'll do it, but I don't think anything is wrong with you. And at this point, it had been almost 2 years of like so many different doctors telling me like nothing is wrong with you, you're fine. 2 days after that MRI, he called me. I'm really sorry. You need to call an oncologist. And you need to do it today.
Did you experience any other symptoms that now looking back you realize were cancer symptoms?
Cancer wasn't even on my radar. I hadn't even considered it as like a remote possibility. The other thing that I was experiencing looking back, had I known, I would have put 2 and 2 together, but I was having crazy night sweats. But because of the back pain, I was sleeping on a heated blanket. So I assumed I was sweating from the heated blankets. I didn't even know night sweats were a cancer symptom. I had no idea. And I had also dropped like 20 pounds.
What happened after you called the oncologist?
So I called the oncologist and they had me come in and do blood work, which was 100% normal. And that oncologist said, I will try to get a PET scan approved by your insurance. It's going to be tough. And also, I have, kids your age come in all the time. Orthopedists thinking it's lymphoma when, it's just some sort of infection. So it's really unlikely that you have cancer. But I was fully convinced at this. He had a really hard time getting my PET scan approved by insurance. Unfortunately, because it took me so long to get to this point, to even get to an oncologist, by the time they found it, it had already spread to almost every single lymph node in my body, my bone marrow, my spleen. So that's what made me stage 4B, meaning I had symptoms. I ultimately chose a different oncologist because I didn't like the first one. Yet again, my treatment at Memorial Sloan Kettering in Jersey, and I've transferred my care now to New York, and I love them. They are fantastic. So if you're on the East Coast and you happen to unfortunately get cancer, highly recommend Sloan.
Let's talk about treatment and side effects of treatment that you have. So for those not in the cancer world, congratulations, number one. But number two, there's lots of different types of treatment for different types of cancers. I've spoken a little bit about the one that I had, which is called bendamustine, which is a little bit less toxic than some of the other treatments that are out there. So my side effects were maybe not traditionally what people would see like on TV. Can you speak a little bit to your treatment and the side effects that you had from that treatment?
So I did BV-ABD is the acronym. One thing that I found interesting, they give you like this giant bucket of side effects that you could have. And it's super scary because you're reading through it. You're like, oh my God, there's so many. But then sometimes things happen that aren't in the packet. And they're like, oh yeah, that's a thing. So I did lose my hair. After my second treatment, it started falling out in clumps. So I shaved my head. Then it kind of came out in little patches. And then after I finished chemo, which I found this to be kind of a sick joke, it didn't even fall all the way out till 2 months after I finished chemo. And my eyebrows fell out after chemo, which also sick joke. Chemo kills rapidly dividing cells, which is why your hair falls out. I had one really rough side effect during chemo, which was bone pain. They give you a shot. For me, I had Neulasta. There's a couple different ones, but it's basically like to stimulate white blood cell production. Apparently, stimulating your bone marrow for white blood cell production is excruciatingly painful. And they tell you to take Claritin to help with so you don't get bone pain. Didn't do jack shit for me at all. The bone pain I did not see coming, and it was horrific. I was on oxycodone like around the clock, would wake up in the middle of the night to take it because I was just in constant pain. And that continued all through treatment and a couple months after. The last big thing that arguably might even be worse than bone pain because I'm still currently dealing with it is neuropathy. For those who don't know, it's basically nerve death in like your hands and your feet. So what caused it was the brentuximab. I didn't really understand what neuropathy would feel like because the way they explained it to me was that it would hurt. And all I was feeling was numbness and tingling in my fingers. And it didn't start until my second to last treatment. It's been, more than a year and a half. I've tried a lot of things to try to help with it. Unfortunately, it is something that it's possible that I'll have to deal with it for the rest of my life. A lot of people think, oh, you go through chemo, you reach remission, and then you're fine. And I think that's not the case for a lot of people. For me, it took me a really long time to even bounce back, especially because I was stage 4. I have a higher chance of relapse. That's a most difficult part of survivorship.
Well, there's a ton to unpack there. And what I want to talk about first, so you and I met through Lymphoma Ladies, which is an Instagram group that has transformed really into so much more than just like online meeting on social media. I know that a lot of you in the States have gotten together and met up in person. But I remember one of my first calls, you were on it. I was so intimidated by you, by the way.
Oh my God, no.
Yes, I was.
I feel like I get that a lot, and I'm very nice, I swear.
No, you are. But I was just like, she's so cool. I hope she'll want to be my friend.
I was obsessed with you from the second you came on, I'll tell you. So,
well, thank you. But I remember one of my first calls, you briefly talking about your experience and all the gaslighting. I get that because same thing happened to me. So I'd like to explore that. Like, what did that feel like being told over and over again that it's just your body or it's in your head or, there's nothing wrong with you or you're just getting old? Like, what did that feel like?
The just getting old comment blew my mind. Every doctor I spoke with was like so adamant that I was fine. I mean, it made me feel, at one point, I even started to believe it. I was like, maybe there isn't anything wrong with me and this is just how my body works. And I think that a lot of that societally, I think a lot of women experience that. Like, I didn't even realize that like some people wake up every morning and are like energized and not in pain. So I think like I didn't know that. It took me a while to learn that fact. So I think there was even a part of me that started to believe it. I was like, well, I guess maybe this is just how it's going to be for the rest of my life. I'm just going to be in pain forever. And I think at one point I even started to kind of just accept that that was a fact. I stopped going to the doctor for like 3 months. I just gave up. I know you experienced the same thing. And I think so many of our other cancer friends have also experienced the same thing. And I think it's why I tend to look for either like female or non-binary doctors as well as like minorities. I think they have similar experiences in the medical field. And I find that they are more caring providers in that sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I had the opposite.
Really?
I had 4 female doctors just tell me like, no, you're good. And it was actually a male doctor who diagnosed me. Well, I would like to talk about how your experience, being gaslit for so long and then finally getting your diagnosis, how has that changed how you approach your medical care now?
I definitely think I feel a lot more empowered to advocate for myself. I think that there have been a wide variety of medical things in my life where I've just kind of given up. It's easier now to like stand up for myself. For example, I got my chemo port taken out in November of last year. I had so many friends who did it just, bedside, no anesthesia, just local. And that really freaked me out. And I think the pre-cancer Rachel just would have done the bedside because that's what they told me to do. But I was like, why would I do that? That sounds awful. So I just demanded twilight anesthesia and they gave it to me. So I think, I feel a lot more confident doing that now. I know that I wasn't able to do that previously.
Yeah. And I think it like sucks that we have to go through cancer to like find our voice to speak up for ourselves. That's awful. The whole point of this podcast is like everything doesn't happen for a reason. There's no silver linings. Like we don't have to say thank you to cancer for teaching us that lesson because we could have learned it without cancer. We didn't need that. And your point about giving up is so real. If you are told over and over and over again that you're crazy, you're going to believe it eventually. Like that's what happens. And that definitely happened to me as well. I had very similarly, I just gave up. I was like, this is the way my body's going to be. I laughed at your comment about, people wake up and they're not in pain. Like that's like a thing. Like, wow. And then, now that my body is somewhat functioning the way it's supposed to, it's like, oh my God, this is cool. This is cool. This might be TMI, but it's my podcast. But like, I used to have to think about, because my cancer started in my cervix. So a lot of my symptoms were related to like my reproductive health and having like severe pain or discharge or whatever it was. I used to have to think about the underwear I would choose every day. That was a big thing because I knew there was certain underwear that would be uncomfortable for me. So every day I had to like plan my laundry so that I had the underwear that was comfortable that I could last the whole day, which is crazy.
It is. And it's just one of those things that I think people who have never dealt with like big health situation or a chronic illness or anything, they just like don't get it. They can't. And that's no, shade, obviously, but it's just people who get it.
Yeah, it's true. And that's why I listen to survivors, especially medical professionals. I think a lot of medical journals are antiquated and outdated, and a lot of like studying was done on biologically male people. Well, I feel like we're going to segue into an interesting topic. I want to understand from your perspective, being a cancer survivor in the United States, like what does that mean? What does Trump being in office mean for you?
A big thing for me is you've done any reading of like Project 2025, for example. A lot of it talks about rolling back the Affordable Care Act. For Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act, a lot of people were just straight up uninsurable because if you have, certain pre-existing conditions and you lose your coverage, you were just kind of screwed before. And then the other thing is like lifetime payout maximums. Insurance companies used to have like a cap of the amount of money that they would pay towards like your care. And eventually you hit a cap and they would just like stop paying. Towards the end of chemo, I went in all my bills that were billed to my insurance and counted how much money was billed by insurance. And I stopped when I hit $1 million, which wasn't about, I was diagnosed in January and I hit $1 million in like April of that year. And I stopped counting. That scares me a lot. Possibility of things like lifetime caps coming back, protections against pre-existing conditions like that going away is terrifying to think about. And then, of course, with chemo or radiation treatment comes potential infertility as well. That is scary for a lot of people. I'm like kind of on the fence about if I want to have kids or not, but I'd like the option. And I would likely need IVF. I think a lot of people assume that just because you live in a blue state, like things are going to be fine and you're going to be safe. But I think we're already starting to see how that's not necessarily the case, especially with things like reproductive health and abortion. How, like, in Texas, for example, there's a lawsuit right now against a doctor in New York for providing the abortion pill via mail. And New York has shield laws, which should block those lawsuits. But the fact that they're even still on the court dockets is scary to me.
I don't want to cry. I remember Ellie bringing up a story. I'm going to cry. Sorry. Taking a moment right now. I want to talk about her, but I also want to respect her family and, her memory. I remember Ellie talking about, like, her treatment being denied. And I don't think people realize people in Canada realize that happens. Because I do talk about that sometimes, where it's like having a friend who's going through cancer, this young, not that age matters, but this young, lively person. And for whatever reason, it's like, no, you can't get that treatment. It's not critical enough, or you can't pay enough. And it's like, how the fuck does that matter when it's someone's life that we're talking about?
I have United. They were very under fire recently for like using AI to process claims. So a lot of the times, like, real people aren't even making the decisions. And it takes so much time and effort and energy once a claim has been denied to be able to appeal it. And you can do everything right. You can appeal it till you're blue in the face and they could still just say no. And it's crazy that ultimately a lot of your care ends up in the hands of not your doctor and not yourself. Ellie, for example, also had lymphoma. In the middle of her treatment, she had an insurance issue, and that delayed her treatments for like 2 months, 2 full months where she could not go get chemo. And I think that, she ultimately ended up passing away, many months later after that happened. But when those kinds of denials of claims are happening all across the country and like resulting in people dying, I'm not even necessarily saying that that's what caused it, but makes you think if it contributed. And the really scary and sad part to me is that that's not a isolated incident. It's not like she's the exception to the rule. I think it's more rare to find somebody who has it in America who hasn't experienced a claim denial than it is to find somebody who had all their claims go through with flying colors. And that is really sad to me. And I think it really speaks to the greed that is really what has driven a lot of the healthcare and insurance industry in America. It's only going to get worse under Trump.
Everybody's got a story,
No, I miss her.
Okay. Whew. Surviving cancer is like coming home after war. Everybody thinks you need to be like your old self again, but there's some scars there. Physical, mental, you're not the same person anymore. And that's like a big thing. People need to realize like who you were before is not who you are now. There's bits and pieces maybe of that old person still there, but we have to adapt to a new normal, and people in our lives also need to adapt to like the new person that we are because of cancer. You talked about being in remission and talked about how with your treatment, it was one that was likely to keep you in remission and reduce your chance of recurrence. I kind of already know the answer, but do you have fears about recurrence?
I do. Yeah. In my day to day, like it isn't something that I constantly think about. If I have a weird pain, that's like my very first thought. My back kind of was twinging today. My first thought was like, I have cancer, it's back. Instead of being like, Rachel, you went to the gym yesterday, like relax. With lymphoma, like a lot of the symptoms are things that you experience from other ailments, like itchiness. You can be itchy for so many reasons. Every time like I start to get a little itchy, I get real nervous. Or if I wake up a little bit sweaty one day, like, and I live in New York. In the summer, it's hot and humid. So I wake up sweaty a lot. I also start to get nervous. I have, blood work every 3 months and scans every 6 months for another year before they move me just to blood work. But I definitely get nervous before appointment. Like my therapist says, like, if it's back, like you worrying about it going into a scan isn't gonna make it go away, but it's hard.
Re-traumatization that happens by blood work, like when I go to Life Labs, this is where we local blood work. I don't know if you have them in the States or not, but you go and it's like you're sitting there and you're waiting and you're looking at all the tubes and you're waiting for the person to come and take your blood. And it's like this routine that was so a part of you during your treatment that it like brings that flood of feelings back. So I'm still in treatment. I'm doing immunotherapy. So I have to do immunotherapy for 2 years. I'll be finished at the end of this year. It'll be my 2 years. It's super exciting. And, every 3 months I get my blood work. I go to the doctor. Then the next day is like I do my treatment and I'm back in the cancer unit. I'm back sitting in the chemo chair. It's going to be 3 years of my life. It's a long time.
It really is. And I try to explain it to people as though like it kind of feels like living your life in 3-month chunks. Because it's like, you have a scan, you start to get anxious, or a blood work, or, in your case, blood work and then immunotherapy, whatever it is, you start to get anxious right before. And then you do the thing, you get it done, you feel great. You're like, I did it and I'm good, currently still good. And then, it's almost like by the time, like, it takes me a bit to like become unanxious, So like by the time I become unanxious again, I have like very little time of feeling normal before I have to go back.
So let's talk about how cancer can impact a relationship. So you were married during treatment. What kind of pressure did that put on your relationship?
I think to start with, it kind of forces you to grow up like really quickly. And I think, in your vows, you say in sickness and in health, the whole thing. But I don't think anybody really imagines that like so early on in a marriage that, one of you is going to have a really intense illness. And I mean, it takes away a lot of your freedom. I couldn't leave the house. I was like bedbound. I think it put a lot of pressure on my marriage. I was really traumatized by the whole experience. And I think that definitely contributed to what ultimately was the end of my relationship. I think that there is a lot of pressure on partner to be like the perfect caregiver. My ex did his best to take care of me as best he could. And I think I was lucky that we had a lot of like outside support as well. But I think that if we didn't have that outside support, I think we would have crumbled a lot earlier. My treatments and appointments were during the week. He ended up having to take off so much time off work. And I think that really impacted not only like his life and our relationship, but also just like our finances. And I think all of those stressors and put a lot of pressure on a relationship, and finances are like one of the major causes of divorce in general, like statistically speaking. And huge illness or medical event like cancer can essentially, especially in America, as we've been talking about, can bankrupt you. I'm still paying medical bills from 2-3 years ago. So I think that also can put so much pressure on a relationship. And I think, too, if you've never had to take care of somebody before, like it can be really hard to suddenly make that like your entire life.
We spoke about earlier, but there was a study done by Reuters where men are 6 times more likely to leave a woman if she's diagnosed with an illness like cancer or MS than a woman is to leave a man. One of the reasons why they think that is men aren't used to being the primary caregivers. And I'm really happy that you felt that your partner was there for you during that time and that you had the additional support. And I count myself very lucky as well to have a partner who, was here and taking care of me. And my mom would fly in every month, but she'd fly in every month and she would massage my feet with lavender. And that was just like the best, massaging my feet. And like, it just felt so good after chemo, It takes a village. And I think people always say that when you're raising kids, it takes a village. But like we were as people not supposed to like do things on our own. We were supposed to do it with this like group, this crew, this tribe, whatever you want to call it. It was supporting one another, this village. And like society totally has it back. We need our people around us.
Yeah. My parents, I was so lucky. They drove all the way to Jersey and like uprooted their lives, stayed with me for many months, brought their dog. My dad worked from out here. My mom's retired. But and they completely took care of my dog, did 100% of the work while I was sick. And without them, I don't think I would have made it.
After going through a divorce, going through cancer, let's talk about identity. Being married, like that's a part of my identity. When you talk about yourself, when you get cancer, that becomes a part of your identity. For a while, it seems like it's all your identity. It's not. We grieve the person that we used to be. So what has this journey been like of rediscovery?
My life was completely like flipped upside down. I think it was really hard for me at first. I felt really lost. I kind of didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had barely been back at work for like a month. But one thing I did know was that I had always wanted to live in New York. Like I felt like home a little bit every time that I would visit. So when I didn't know what to do, I was like, I guess I'm going to move to New York. It took some time for me to even figure out how to human again on my own. You go from like being a 2-person household and even with all the cancer stuff, like having to do all of it by myself now. I'm lucky that I have amazing friends who come with me to appointments. I have an incredible roommate who, I got my report taken out and I came home to a whole little like plant and candy for my recovery and the whole thing. So I'm very lucky that I'm surrounded by a lot of people who love me and are there for me. But ultimately, I'm still doing this on my own. I had to spend a lot of time just thinking about what I wanted to do. It was like sort of like a mindset switch from thinking about like what I thought my future was going to look like. And it ultimately did feel rather free because I went from thinking, I had to do all of these things at a certain timeline. It feels now like I have so much more time. And I think part of that is because after going through cancer and like almost dying, I have this sort of idea that, tomorrow isn't always promised. One thing that I always like to bring up when I talk about how I kind of refound myself is that I started to get a lot of tattoos. And I think you can kind of relate to this. During chemo and treatment and everything, it felt like so many of my choices were kind of like taken away from me and I didn't really have a lot of autonomy over my body. And so when I finished chemo and I was in remission for a while, I was like, I really want to do something with my body that's my choice, my decision. So I started to decorate it. I feel more like at home inside my body, if that makes sense. I think that like a lot of us get through treatment by kind of like dissociating a little bit. And I feel like I kind of, after I finished, I felt very disconnected from myself and very disconnected from my body. And I think like getting tattoos and dressing how I want to dress and all of that has made me feel a lot more at home with myself. And I think all of that are feelings that I didn't have before cancer, really. So I think that is one thing that I'm like very happy that I've rediscovered since.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I guess it's 14 months I've been in remission and I've gotten 14 tattoos since then. I'm very fortunate. I love my tattoo artist. She's actually going to be a guest on this show because she is a breast cancer survivor. Shout out to Tara, Tara T Tattoos on Instagram. She's the best. And I agree with you. Like this rediscovering yourself is so fun. because for me personally, I've always identified in my brain as a maximalist. Like I'm just out and bold and I want everything to be hot pink and green and blue and all these colors. And I like never lived that truth before. It was always one day. And so now I live like one day's today. And if I wake up and message Tara and say, are you free this week for a tattoo? Can I come in tomorrow? Like I'm a bit more spontaneous and I just do what feels right and feels good versus what I think is supposed to happen or the way the society thinks I should be. Do you struggle at all with people accepting this version of yourself, living more boldly and more out loud and more authentic to who you are? Or has everyone been pretty receptive to that?
I think for me, because this is kind of like coming along with, my divorce and everything. And I think for a while, like, I think that I had kind of like withdrawn a decent amount before pre-cancer, just like in my relationship and everything. And I think that I hear a lot of, we're so happy to like see you again, like truly you receptive. And I think that when you love yourself and you feel at home with yourself, I think people can tell. Like I even look at photos of myself, like from when I first started feeling sick to now. And like, it's like a night and day, complete difference. And like, not only because I look different, yeah, I'm a couple years older, I have short hair now, I have tattoos, etc. But like, I think I look just more me, and I feel more myself.
You're going to make me cry. I've known you for a couple years now, basically since we both were diagnosed, and I've always thought you were amazing and cool. And I really do see you living your truth, and it's so good to see. You seem genuinely happy. You're such a cool person to know. You're such a beautiful soul. I'm grateful for every moment that we've shared together, even though cancer brought us together. I'm really proud of you. You are always in my heart, and I'm just...
You're gonna make me cry.
Okay. All right. We're gonna wrap it up because now we're just gonna cry and tell each other how much we love each other. Okay, so my final question that I ask everyone is, when life gives you lemons, what's one choice that you can make?
Just like, fuck it. Fuck it. Do the things that make you happy. Like you said, if you wake up one day and you're like, I want to go get a tattoo today, go do it. This year, I want to make sure I go travel to this place that I've always wanted to go. Do it. Like, life is too short and tomorrow is never promised. Go do the things you want to do. If there's something you've always wanted to do your whole life, go do it. Do the thing.
I love that. Yes to doing the thing always. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being my guest. I love you dearly.
I love you. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Siobhan Mondesire, saying, stay sour, my friends.